right, you squares. I'm back, and it's going to be a ramble, man, and it might not make sense. So forgive me if I go off track, and forgive me if I don't keep a thread of logic, because this is just really coming off the dome. So, like I said, in advance, forgive me if it doesn't make sense, and you're fully welcome to tell me that I'm full of shit down in the comment section, but try to be respectful if you do, okay? So I don't have to delete your comment. Anyhow, I just want to talk about something for a second. I'm going to talk about the experience over the past couple of weeks with a couple of people, right? And I'm going to mention their names. FD Signifier on the top end, and basically Mary Brown on the low end, and what they have in common. Even they're coming at it from two different angles, or I should say two different sides, but really they're saying almost the same thing. One is coming from an academic language because he's got the training. One is coming from basically the street. Okay, he's a street philosopher, for lack of a better term. Sometimes he thinks that he's smarter than he is. And that's the Mary Brown, okay? I said, my dude, if you can't do analysis and you analyze your own reading, then I don't know what to tell you, man. I can't help you, okay? The need to be right, actually the need to be right is strong with both of them. The need to be right is strong with both of them. But the thing is, since FD Signifier, Feek has more training, he has to be grounded more, and his stuff has to be more accurate, even though they kind of wind up in the same place. They don't even realize, well, I know Feek does, because in the academy you have to name yourself, okay? You just can't float around with some amorphous ideology and not have it grounded into some kind of school of thought. So he has to name himself. Whereas Mary Brown, since he's coming from the street, does not. Even though they're both intersectional feminists, and they're coming from that brand of philosophy, or that brand of ideology, one realizes who he is and the other one doesn't. One is against the patriarchy, okay? Supposedly, okay, we'll deal with that in another video. I think I've dealt with that with the white gynocracy. And one is for the patriarchy. I know initially that doesn't make sense. That's what happens when you ground yourself and you're searching for an ideology instead of the truth. Philosophy, at its base, no matter how you approach it, you might look at Heidegger, you might look at Nietzsche, Locke, Rousseau, Hobbes, Hegel, no matter who you look at, Descartes, okay, no matter who you look at, it's a search for the truth. It's not in search of an ideology. You name your brand of ideology, but the thing is, at the end of the day, that's just a tool in search for the truth. Heidegger might have been a Nazi. He might, with Nazi, nothing, we'll talk about what a Nazi really is. Nazi is nothing but an authoritarian that goes back to Bismarck. If you understand Bismarck, you understand Nazis. If you understand Bismarck, you understand a Nazi. Most people don't make that connection. It took me a few years to make that connection between Nazis, Hitler, and Bismarck, but that's an aside. Okay, I know that's a rabbit hole, so forgive me. Like I said, this stuff is not really going to be connected as much as it should be, because I have not connected the dots in my own mind. This is just more of a feeling. But even under Heidegger, it's a search for the truth, or the truth as much as you can flesh it out. Not my truth, or the subjective truth, but the truth, the underlying truth, the underlying nature, the underlying message throughout all things, all right? That's what we call Gnosticism, the knowing. Basically, Gnosticism is basically the search for the truth. And all Gnosticism, as I branded in my name, right, Black Gnosticism is basically the search for the truth, the underlying truth in all things. And if you have the search for the underlying truth in all things, then you can't wed yourself to an ideology. An ideology is a silo. An ideology says what I think or what I believe is the truth. And that's really not what philosophy is about. Because as you uncover things, and I've done this over the past, it's got to be, since I was sitting in Air Force ROTC as an 18-year-old, man, at USC, and discovering that what I thought the world wasn't, okay? That there is an underlying philosophy or underlying ideology and all things that you're not aware of, but they're actually connected to something practical or what people think are practical. And I'll tell you really what it was that I had to do a paper, military doctrine, and I picked the 2.5 wars doctrine that had been in place since World War II. And my ROTC professor actually talked about it's a real doctrine, right, that's still in place, that we still use today. In fact, Robert Gates actually used it against Barack Obama in 2011, I do believe, or 2011, with the Libyan war, which is why he virtually resigned, because of the 2.5 war policy. But you have to go back and look that up, okay? But that's an aside, okay? But my search for the truth has been since then, since I was an 18-year-old, over iterations of different schools of thought, from ultra-conservative to ultra-liberal to middle progressive to agnostic. My last foray as far as political leanings was through Craig Hewlett, and he told me that there's no difference between the right and the left. They all believe in the same thing. And they all believe in the same thing that matter. The right and the left don't disagree on the things that matter. The stuff we talk about, the stuff that we disagree with on the right and left, are not the things that matter. How many people on the left disagree with the Ukrainian war? You have just as many people on the right, so-called right, as you do on the so-called left that disagree with the Ukraine war. But the vast majority of the people in the middle agree with it, left and right, because they understand about the things that matter. And that's my search for the truth. That's my philosophy. That's how come over the past year or so, I've gravitated to John Mearsheimer, which most people, most philosophers, and most geopolitical folks do not like, because he's very blunt, because he's a structural realist, and people can't stand that, because he's willing to tell the truth about how countries and societies think and function and are in opposition to each other. Same thing with any group in America, including black people, which comes down to the ideology that's going back and forth between black men and women, supposedly. And we're all squawking about the things that probably don't matter, because we're squawking about not what's real or not things that ultimately matter, because if we did, we would fix the things that are wrong. But we're talking about feeling. Dr. Umar, the black manosphere are saying things that make women feel bad. And this is something I said a long time when I first booted up my channel, right? Especially my Ibmore channel, right? My first thing was, fuck your feelings, cupcake. Even my women's channel. My main thing was, fuck your feelings, cupcake. Let's get down to the truth. When I had my women's channel, all I wanted for any woman to come up, no matter how she felt, I wanted to be honest about it. Be honest. So you can get pushback, so we can actually talk about it, so we can get down to the nitty gritty about why you feel a certain way. It's always the why. Because in the why, as far as Gnosticism, the why is the truth, okay? The what, when, how, stuff like that are actually emanate from the why. The universe is created not from the what, when, and how, but the why. Why did that spark out of the midst of nothing, or supposedly nothing, decided to change? That started creation. Why did it? Nobody understands why. It just happened. And the what, when, how, and all the other things come out of the why. And we hear all these ideas, all these interactions, all these ideologies, and ideologies are centered around, sometimes, centered around more about the what, okay? Because an ideology is about a what I want, what I believe, what I think, what I want to see happen. It's all about a what, less about a when. And definitely not about a how, because ideologies don't care about hows, but they never consider a why. Because if you consider your why, then you're going to have to leave your ideology to the side and see what the underlying truth is. And that's the problem with an empty signifier and a Mary Brown. They're thinking about the what. They're stuck on the what. They really don't have a concept of the how. And when is always nebulous, okay? But to make real impact, you have to consider the why. It takes me back to this scene on The Wrath of Khan when Captain Kirk was talking to, I forget the character's name, played by Kirstie Allen. She was actually quoting Starfleet regulations. And Khan had basically torpedoed the ship against Starfleet regulations. And basically, he explained to her, you have to understand why certain things work and certain protocols work or in place on a Starfleet ship. And he sent information over to Khan's ship that he didn't know about and told Khan's ship to lower his shield so he could actually reply and hit them with a barrage of torpedoes and actually kind of wound them. Why do things work a certain way on a Starfleet ship? Why are there protocols in place? There's an underlying reason for it. I had an argument with a couple of Jehovah's Witnesses, not a real argument, discussion. It wasn't even an argument because after a while they wanted to know more about their own scriptures. Why are certain scriptures implemented, even no matter who you think they came from, implemented into your scriptures as a message to the people? There's an underlying reason why. Everybody always talks about the what and the how, but never the why. Why would God tell you to do this, thus, and so? What is the underlying reason for it? That's philosophy. That's supposed to be philosophy, the search for the truth, the search for the why. And I see far too many people in this political, economic, and academic space that throw around ideologies, which are what's, and wonder why this chaos consumes this whole society is because we're into the what, not the why. We had 16 hours of going back and forth with Amiri Brown and his intersectional feminist ideology that he thinks is patriarchy. Okay? How you marry intersectional feminism and patriarchy in the same framework, ideological framework, man, you have to do some kind of bending. It's worse than a Jenga, Jenga tower, right? All these different pieces all mixed up. Worse than the game called Twister. You got to contort yourself to actually fit that ideology or that framework into some kind of coherent ideology, which is why he's not coherent, which is why he's scattered. But that's neither here nor there. And basically, this is the same reason why the FD signifier stuff never goes. You know, it sounds good, but never goes anywhere because it's twisted. It doesn't make any practical sense. At the end of the day, the stuff has to be practical. It has to work. It has to have why underneath that ideology to make it work. And it doesn't, which is why it's doomed to fail, which is why it's failing. Feminism is actually failing. It's going to give way to something else, but the thing is actually failing. Second wave feminism failed. Third wave feminism is probably not going to do much better because it's about the what and not the why. And that's what's wrong with, and these are just two people that I'm choosing because they've been going around over the past couple of weeks with their rhetoric, and they've been shopping it around, and they're wondering why they're getting resistance. It's because there's no underlying why to what they're talking about. This is why Andrew Tate and before him Kevin Samuels took off. Why did they blow up? Why are they a phenomenon? Why are they still being talked about? Because they didn't deal with the what. They deal with the why. Me and Kevin talked about this way before he blew up. Way before he blew up. In fact, I played a portion of one of my old hangouts, okay, on my women's channel, where he discovered his why things are. Why are black male and female relationships so screwed up? And he applied that why, his why, to it. That's how come women kept coming back night after night after night and after night, listening to him, because he didn't talk about what was immaterial. He talked about why, which is the search for the truth about why their lives were the way they were and what the truth of the situation was. Search for the truth. And before I jump off, this is a shout out to my lefty whisperer, Mr. Z. You're doing the Lord's work with these lefties, with this lunacy that they're putting out. And really what it is lunacy. And really it's poison. You're feeding your society poison. Unintentionally because you think it's the right thing, but you're feeding them poison. You're feeding the whole society aspartame and passing it off as real sugar. And aspartame is a subtle poison. It's a neurotoxin that tricks your brain into thinking that what you're tasting is sweet. But in large amounts or copious amounts, it's a neurotoxin, poison, which is why your society is coming apart at the seams. You think this is healthy, and it's preached as healthy, but your society is coming apart at the seams because you're interested on the what I think, what I feel, what I want, instead of the why. Why are we here? Why are we together? What's the truth of how we work? What's the truth of how a society functions? And why does it function effectively? Or why does it not function effectively? Okay, what's the problem? Saw that more in the 60s than you do in the 70s, 80s, and since. Because in the 60s, they had to. They had to figure out a why. Because they needed to apply what and a how and a when. Out of necessity. They haven't done that in a while. It's gone off the rails. But I think I've gone on long enough. This is just a random thought about the philosophy of why and the truth. I think I'll put that in the title. But with that, I'm going to jump off here. This is BGS out now. See you guys on the next one. Peace.